Having reduced a prince to a clown, Empress Anna now set about staging a marriage for him, one that was meticulously designed to be the absolute pinnacle of mockery. If his first marriage was an act of love that had defied her authority, this one would be a grotesque pageant of obedience that would disgust the entire world. For his bride, Anna searched not for a woman of beauty or grace, but for her polar opposite. She chose a woman from her own household staff. While her exact identity is lost to history, she is most often remembered by the name of Dosha Buzananova. Some historical accounts suggest this surname may have been a cruel joke in itself, as it's derived from the Russian word for baked pork, a dish the empress was said to be particularly fond of. Avdosha was a Kalmyk, a member of a nomadic people from the southern steppes of Russia. The legend, amplified over the centuries, describes her as being deliberately chosen for what the court considered her ugliness, an old, stooped servant selected specifically to make the parody of a wedding as visually grotesque as possible. This detail, whether true or not, served to heighten the chilling cruelty of the narrative. The bride herself was not just a participant, but another victim, her very appearance weaponized for the empress's amusement. The wedding, which took place in the bone-chilling cold of early 1740, was announced as a major court event, a grand celebration ostensibly marking a recent Russian victory over the Ottoman Empire. But everyone knew its true purpose: the final, public degradation of Prince Golitsyn. The spectacle began with a parade through the frozen streets of St. Petersburg, an event so bizarre, so nightmarish, it sounds like a fever dream. Later accounts, which grew more fantastical over time, describe a scene straight from hell's own circus. Golitsyn and Avdosha, dressed in garish, mismatched clown costumes, were placed together inside what some sources claim was a large iron cage. This cage was then strapped to the back of an elephant, which plodded slowly and deliberately through the city, ensuring the entire populace could witness the humiliation of the mismatched couple. Following the elephant was a procession unlike any other. According to these popular, sensationalized accounts, Anna had commanded that representatives from the many diverse ethnic groups within her vast empire be brought to the capital to participate. These people, dressed in their traditional garments, were forced to ride on a bizarre menagerie of animals. There were sledges pulled by reindeer and camels, but the legends also claim there were people riding on pigs, goats, and even dogs. They were given strange and cacophonous instruments, creating a horrifying symphony to accompany the grim parade. This wasn't a celebration of the empire's diversity, it was a mockery of it, a chaotic circus with the prince and his bride as the tormented main attraction. The parade's final destination was a structure as strange, as beautiful, and as cruel as the procession itself, a palace made entirely of ice. While many elements of this story are clouded by legend, the existence of the Ice Palace is a well-documented historical fact. During the brutal Russian winter of 1739 to 1740, one of the coldest on record, Empress Anna commissioned the construction of an astonishing structure on the frozen Neva River, positioned directly between the Admiralty and her own opulent winter palace. Under the direction of court architects and engineers, with input from scientists at the Academy of Sciences, military personnel were tasked with harvesting enormous blocks of pure, clear ice from the river. These blocks, some reportedly weighing hundreds of pounds, were cut with surgical precision. They were then glued together with water, which froze instantly in the punishing sub-zero temperatures, welding the structure into a single, seamless, solid piece. The final palace was a terrifying marvel of frozen architecture. Contemporary accounts describe a building roughly 80 feet long and over 30 feet high, glittering like a diamond under the weak winter sun. But the true wonder and the true horror of the palace was in its details. This was no empty shell of ice. Inside, every single piece of furniture was carved from ice. There were ice chairs, ice tables, and most importantly, a grand bridal bed, complete with an ice mattress, ice pillows, and delicately carved ice curtains. The rooms were adorned with intricate ice sculptures. The legends claim an icy fireplace was filled with logs of ice, which were cleverly smeared with oil and set alight, burning with a strange, cold, ethereal fire that gave off no heat, only an eerie, flickering light. The grounds surrounding the palace were an enchanted, frozen garden of the damned. There were ice trees with perfectly carved ice leaves and ice birds perched silently on their branches. There was even a life-sized ice statue of an elephant which, through a clever plumbing mechanism, could spout water from its trunk during the day. But it's the legendary details that transformed this architectural marvel into a true house of horrors. It was said that the palace was flanked by ice cannons and mortars. According to the tales, these cannons were not merely decorative. The legends insist they were loaded with small amounts of gunpowder and successfully fired, a testament to the strange properties of the super-frozen ice. The ice elephant of the legend was even more spectacular at night, capable of spouting jets of burning oil into the darkness, a beautiful and terrifying spectacle. This palace was both a scientific curiosity and a chilling demonstration of absolute power. It showed that the Empress could command not just her subjects, but nature itself, bending the very elements to her will. It was a place of breathtaking beauty and profound, lurking menace. And it was here, inside this cold, glittering tomb, that the mock wedding was to reach its climax. After the parade and a lavish banquet, the two jesters were brought to their bridal suite, where the true horror of Empress Anna's plan was about to unfold. And here, we arrive at the heart of the legend. Here, we leave the realm of documented history and enter the chilling narrative that has been whispered in horror for nearly 3 centuries. This is the story immortalized by Ivan Lazarnikov's novel, The Ice House, a masterpiece of psychological terror so powerful it has almost completely replaced the truth. It may not be verifiable history, but its power to terrify is undeniable. The story goes that after the grotesque festivities, Prince Golitsyn and his bride Avdotya were led into the ice palace. The heavy doors were closed behind them, and armed guards were posted outside with strict and simple orders. No one was to enter, and the newlyweds were not to be allowed to escape before morning. They were then forced to strip naked and were shoved into the icy bridal chamber, left with nothing but the clothes they were born in. The Empress, before leaving them to their fate, is said to have given them one final, chilling piece of advice. They should embrace and consummate their marriage with as much vigor as possible, as it was the only way they might generate enough body heat to survive the night. Imagine the scene. The room is glowing, the ice walls and furniture refracting the pale moonlight into 1,000 cold, dead sparks. Every surface they touch sears their skin with a burning cold. The bed, an ornate slab of ice, offers no comfort, only the promise of a faster, more agonizing death. The silence is broken only by the violent chattering of their teeth and the mournful whisper of the wind outside. This was not just a death sentence. It was a carefully constructed torture chamber designed for maximum physical and psychological suffering, a place where hope itself would slowly freeze and die along with its victims. The story, as it has been passed down through the generations, then transforms from one of pure horror to one of desperate survival. As the hours passed and the numbing, insidious cold began to overwhelm them, Prince Golitsyn reportedly began to succumb, his body racked with uncontrollable shivers as he drifted in and out of a hypothermic consciousness. But Avdotya, the quiet Kalmyk servant, the woman chosen as a prop in this cruel play, proved to be the more resourceful of the two. In this legendary telling, she possessed one single item of value, a pearl necklace, given to her earlier by the Empress as a final, cruel wedding gift. Desperate, on the verge of freezing, she managed to get the attention of one of the guards standing duty outside. In a hushed, frantic bargain, a whisper through the ice, she offered him the priceless necklace in exchange for a simple sheepskin coat, a tulip. The guard, perhaps moved by a flicker of pity, or perhaps just by simple human greed, accepted the trade. He passed the heavy, warm coat into the frozen chamber. That single act of bribery and compassion, according to the legend, is what saved their lives. Huddled together under the thick, life-giving sheepskin, they managed to fend off the worst of the lethal cold. They survived the night. When the guards unsealed the doors the next morning, they did not find 2 frozen corpses as the Empress had so clearly intended. They found a man and a woman, shivering, frostbitten, and barely conscious, but miraculously, impossibly, alive. This tale, of a pearl necklace exchanged for a life, has become the story's most enduring symbol of defiance in the face of absolute, monstrous cruelty. But what happened after that long, frozen night? What became of the jesters who survived a death sentence written in ice? Unsurprisingly, the historical record is hauntingly quiet on the precise fate of Prince Golitsyn and of Dosha Buzananova. Their survival was an embarrassment, and the court moved on. The most sensational versions of the story end right there, with their miraculous survival against all odds. But other accounts, more folklore than fact, offer brief, often contradictory conclusions. A more hopeful, but completely unverified, version of the story suggests that their ordeal had a surprisingly gentle end. Empress Anna Ioannovna died later that same year, in October 1740, from a kidney disease. Her decade-long reign of terror was finally over. After a chaotic succession, power eventually fell to a new regent, Anna Leopoldovna. According to this legend, the new regent took pity on the court's most famous jesters. She reportedly freed both Mikhail Golitsyn and Avdosha from their servitude. In this telling, the couple, bound together forever by their shared trauma, chose to remain married. It's even said they went on to have 2 children together before Avdosha passed away a couple of years later. We cannot be certain if any of this is true. It offers a touch of humanity to an otherwise brutal tale, but the reality is likely far colder. Their fates were probably considered so insignificant that no one bothered to record what happened to them. As for the palace, it met the inevitable fate of all things made of ice. As the brutal Russian winter finally gave way to the spring thaw, the magnificent structure began to weep. By April, the proud walls were sagging and groaning. By early summer, the entire palace, with its ice furniture and frozen birds, had dissolved back into the dark waters of the Neva River, leaving no trace of its terrible existence. But the legacy of the Ice Palace was far more permanent than its physical form. The event became the ultimate symbol of Empress Anna's entire reign. It perfectly encapsulated her terrifying personality, her love of expensive, grand spectacles, her vindictive and sadistic nature, and her penchant for using public humiliation as a tool of absolute power. While she ruled for a decade, it is this single, bizarre, and monstrous episode that has defined her forever in the popular imagination. The story's power was fully cemented in 1835, nearly a century after the palace had melted away, with the publication of Ivan Lazeknikov's novel, The Ice House. Lazeknikov took the known historical facts, the Empress, the Jester, the mock wedding, the Ice Palace, and wove them into a heart-pounding dramatic narrative, filling in the terrifying gaps with romance, suspense, and the harrowing, granular details of that wedding night. It was his novel that introduced the bribe of the pearl necklace and solidified the idea of the event as a deliberate, cold-blooded murder attempt. His book was a sensation, and it has shaped nearly every retelling since, from paintings to films to the very story as it's often told today. The story of the Ice Palace is a powerful, chilling reminder that history is often a terrifying blend of fact and folklore, where the truth is embellished to better capture a deeper, emotional reality. The cruelty of Empress Anna was real. The fear she inspired was real. And the memory of that cruelty was so profound that it required a legend of this magnitude to properly contain it. These forgotten corners of history, where human drama and political power collide in such spectacular and horrifying ways, are endlessly fascinating. If you agree, and you want to explore more stories that have been lost, twisted, or reshaped by time, make sure you subscribe to History's Chronicles of Horror and join our community of historical explorers. In the end, what are we to make of the empress who built a palace of ice for a wedding to the death? We have the historical truth, a powerful, insecure, and monstrously cruel ruler who staged a bizarre and humiliating spectacle to punish a disgraced nobleman. The Ice Palace was a real, breathtaking, and ostentatious display of her absolute authority. The mock wedding was a real, grotesque piece of court theater designed to degrade, intimidate, and terrify. And then we have the legend, born from that truth but amplified into something more. A story of a wedding night spent on a bed of solid ice, of a life bartered for a pearl necklace, of survival against all possible odds. This legend persists not because it is perfectly factual, but because it feels true to the spirit of Anna's dark era. It captures the sheer terror of living under a ruler whose whims were law, and whose humor was a weapon of torment. The story of the Ice Palace shows us how history is made and remade, first by the terrifying actions of the powerful, and then by the chilling stories we tell about them, ensuring that even long after the ice has melted, the memory remains frozen in time. Before you go, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join us at History's Chronicles of Horror for more journeys into the darkest chapters of the past. Picture a wedding night. Now, imagine the bridal suite isn't just cold, it's carved from solid ice. The bed is a single, massive block of frozen river water. The pillows are jagged slabs of ice. The curtains are thin, translucent sheets of ice that rattle like glass in the slightest draft. There are no fires, no blankets. There is only the fading warmth of your own body and the chilling presence of the person beside you, a stranger forced into this nightmare with you. This wasn't some dark fairy tale. This was a spectacle of breathtaking cruelty, a vicious and theatrical joke orchestrated by one of the most feared women in Russian history. For a disgraced prince and his new bride, this was their ghastly reality, a public humiliation so elaborate, so profoundly evil, that it was clearly designed to end in their slow, agonizing, freezing death. It's a story so grim, so operatic in its barbarity, that it sounds like something torn from the pages of a fantasy epic. But at its heart is a real historical event, a moment in time that has become shrouded in a terrifying legend. It stands as a testament to the absolute power and profound, personal cruelty of an empress scorned. And tonight, we will step inside that palace of horrors. Welcome to History's Chronicles of Horror. Tonight, we unravel the story of Empress Anna Ioannovna and her infamous ice palace. This is a tale that walks a razor's edge between documented fact and folkloric terror. A real palace of ice was most certainly built. A real mock wedding, a parade of human humiliation, absolutely took place. But the most monstrous parts of the story, the overnight imprisonment in a frozen tomb, the desperate fight for survival, the chilling command to consummate a marriage or freeze to death, these details have a much more complicated and mysterious origin. They were solidified in the public imagination, burned into the history books not by eyewitness accounts, but by a historical novel written nearly a century later. Ivan Lazeknikov's The Ice House took what was already a bizarre and cruel court event and transformed it into an unforgettable legend of terror. So, our journey tonight is a dual one. First, we must understand the very real Empress and her very real reign of fear. And then, we must explore how a single, sadistic act could blossom into one of history's most chilling tales, separating the documented horror from the dramatic legend it inspired. The truth, you will find, is terrifying enough. To even begin to comprehend how a ruler could conceive of such a spectacle, you have to understand the woman who ordered it. Anna Ioannovna, Empress of all Russia. Her path to the throne was a twisted one, and her life was steeped in bitterness and resentment long before she held absolute power in her hands. Born in 1693, Anna was the daughter of Ivan V, who was technically the Khazar of Russia alongside his half-brother, the man who would eclipse nearly everyone in Russian history, Peter the Great. But Ivan was mentally and physically disabled, a ceremonial figurehead at best. This left Anna's side of the family in a state of perpetual political irrelevance, living in the shadow of Peter the Great's titanic ambition. She was a royal, yes, but one who was seen and not truly valued, a pawn to be moved around the board. Her life took a tragic turn when, at just 17 years old, she was married off to Frederick William, the Duke of Courland, a small duchy in modern-day Latvia. It was a strategic move by her powerful uncle Peter. Letters from the time suggest that Anna was perhaps genuinely in love, seeing in this marriage a flicker of a happy future, a life of her own. But that flicker was extinguished almost immediately. Just weeks after the wedding, on the brutal winter journey back to Courland, her new husband drank himself into a stupor and died, leaving the teenage Anna a widow in a foreign land. She would remain there, ruling as a regent for nearly 2 decades, isolated and politically constrained, while a deep well of resentment carved itself into her soul. Then, in 1730, fate took a bizarre and unexpected turn. The young Tsar Peter II, Peter the Great's grandson, died of smallpox without an heir. The Supreme Privy Council, a group of powerful Russian nobles, saw their chance. They wanted a ruler they could control. Looking past other, more prominent candidates, They offered the throne to the seemingly unassuming widow. In Courland, Anna Ioannovna. Their offer, however, came with a diabolical catch, a set of conditions that would have severely limited her power, turning the Russian autocracy into a constitutional monarchy and making her a puppet for the very aristocracy that had always looked down on her family. Anna, seeing her one and only chance at real power, played her part beautifully. She signed the document. But the nobles had made a fatal miscalculation. They had severely, catastrophically, underestimated her. Upon her arrival in Moscow, she found that the lower nobility despised the council of elites far more than they feared a single autocrat. With their backing, Anna staged a masterful piece of political theater. In a grand ceremony, she took the conditions she had signed and, before the stunned court, she literally tore the document to pieces. She declared her right to rule as an absolute autocrat, just as her uncle Peter the Great had. The council members who had tried to restrain her were utterly broken. Many were arrested, their fortunes seized, and they were exiled to the frozen, unforgiving wastes of Siberia. It was a terrifying statement. From that moment on, Anna's rule would be absolute, and she would make sure no one ever forgot it. Her decade on the throne, from 1730 to 1740, is known in Russia as the Baronovshchina, or the Time of Byron. This name refers to her lover and closest advisor, Ernst Johann von Byron, a man from her time in Courland who was universally despised by the Russian nobles as a cruel, greedy, and grasping foreigner. Together, they presided over a court culture steeped in paranoia and visceral fear. A secret investigative chancellery was established, a secret police that encouraged citizens to inform on one another. The slightest whisper of disloyalty, real or imagined, could lead to torture, exile, or execution. Thousands were banished on the flimsiest of suspicions. It was a dark, suffocating era, where the Empress's personal whims meant the difference between life and death. Anna herself was a woman of stark, unsettling contrasts. She continued some of Peter the Great's westernizing projects, funding the Academy of Sciences and establishing new military corps. But her personal tastes were described by many as crude, vulgar, and cruel. She had a grim, morbid sense of humor and a strange obsession with court jesters, dwarfs, and other entertainers. She delighted in forcing members of the highborn nobility she so deeply distrusted into these roles, humiliating them publicly. She was an avid hunter, and it said she kept loaded guns by the windows of her palace to shoot birds as they flew past, day after day. It was this terrifying combination, absolute power, a bitter and vindictive personality, and a love for grotesque, cruel spectacle, that set the stage for the Ice Palace. She was a ruler who didn't just enjoy having power. She reveled in demonstrating it in the most theatrical and sadistic ways imaginable. And soon, she would find the perfect target for her most elaborate and horrifying masterpiece of cruelty. The man who would become the unfortunate star of the Empress's most infamous spectacle came from one of Russia's oldest and most distinguished noble families, Prince Mikhail Alexandrovich Golitsyn. The Golitsyns were ancient aristocracy, men who had served Tsars for centuries, wielding immense power and influence. But in Empress Anna's court, a noble name was no guarantee of safety. In fact, it often made you a bigger target. While time and legend have blurred the precise details, the popular account of Prince Golitsyn's fall from grace is a dramatic tale of forbidden love. While traveling abroad in Europe, Prince Golitsyn fell deeply in love with an Italian woman. In order to marry her, he made a decision that, in the eyes of the fanatically Russian Orthodox Empress, was an unforgivable sin. He converted to Roman Catholicism. This was not seen as a simple personal choice. It was an act of profound betrayal of his faith, his country, and his empress. When news of this marriage and conversion reached Anna, she was predictably enraged. Tragically, Golitsyn's Catholic wife died soon after their marriage. The grieving prince eventually returned to Russia, perhaps hoping that his loss might earn him some small measure of pity. He found none from Empress Anna. She had not forgotten his transgression. As punishment for his brief conversion, she decided to subject him to the ultimate, soul-crushing humiliation. She stripped him of his princely title, seized his lands, and decreed that this man of noble blood, this prince, would now serve as one of her court jesters. This wasn't just a change in title, it was a complete social and personal annihilation. He was forced to perform bizarre and demeaning tasks for the amusement of the court. Legend has it that he was given the humiliating Jester nickname Kvasnik, and his primary duty was to serve kvass, a fermented Russian drink, to the empress and her guests. But the most enduring and perhaps embellished image of his degradation, repeated in countless stories, is of him being forced to sit in a large basket constructed near the empress's throne, sometimes filled with eggs, and ordered to cackle and pretend to be a laying hen. Can you imagine the psychological torture? For a man born to privilege and power, this was a fate worse than a quick, clean death. He was kept alive as a living monument to the empress's power, a constant, cowering reminder to the rest of the nobility of what awaited them if they ever dared to displease her. But Anna's revenge was not yet complete. The humiliation of being made a jester was only the first act. The grand, horrific finale of his punishment would be a wedding.